For my daughter's 6th birthday, my in-laws sent her a cute brown teddy bear as a gift. She looked happy at first, then froze. "Mommy, what is it?" I looked closer and went pale. I didn't shout. I took action. 3 days later, police were at their door. Mia's 6th birthday was supposed to be simple. Cupcakes, paper hats. 3 little girls shrieking in my living room like tiny opera singers who'd been raised entirely on glitter and spite. The problem with simple is that it requires your life to also be simple, and mine very much was not. I was in the middle of divorcing Adam. The paperwork was floating around like a bad smell. The tension was everywhere and nowhere, which is a fun way to live when you're trying to keep a 6-year-old from noticing her world is being rearranged. So I tried to compensate. I went full birthday mom. I put up streamers. I made goodie bags. I baked cupcakes from scratch instead of doing the normal person thing and buying them from a grocery store bakery that employs professionals and probably has a health certificate. I even invited my parents to stay. I don't know why I did that. Maybe guilt, maybe self-harm, maybe I wanted witnesses in case I snapped and started eating frosting directly out of the piping bag with my hands. I did. The witnesses were polite. There were 3 friends, Mia's best friends, which changes weekly, but today it was these 3. Their parents hovered with that awkward energy of people trying to be supportive without admitting they've already asked their spouse. So are Michelle and Adam, you know. I smiled too much. I laughed too fast. I used the voice you use when you're hosting a baby shower for someone you hate. Everything was fine. Mia was fine. And then the mail came. It was a neat pink box with a bow that looked like it had been measured and tied by a person who irons bed sheets. Janet and Frank, my in-laws, the type of people who believe presentation is character. There was a note taped to the top. For Mia, open today. Because of course, Janet and Frank weren't coming to this party. Mia was having another birthday with Adam a few days later. Her dad's birthday, as Mia called it. Like Adam was the one turning 6, and not just the one who would probably show up late and then blame traffic for the concept of time. But Janet and Frank wanted their gift opened now, so we added it to the pile. Kids opening presents together is chaos in a pure form, like a natural disaster with better wrapping paper. Mia ripped through a bag of stickers, squealed at a sparkly water bottle, and held up a plastic unicorn as if she'd discovered fire. Then she grabbed the pink box. "This one is from Grandma and Grandpa," she sang, like announcing a new character in a play. She opened it carefully, because Janet taught her to be gentle, which sounds sweet until you realize gentle is just Janet's word for obedient. Inside was a brown teddy bear with a little heart stitched on its chest. Mia's whole face lit up. She loved stuffed animals. She loved anything soft and loyal and silent. Honestly, the same. "Oh my gosh," she whispered, hugging it like it had rescued her from a burning building. The other girls crowded around. "Oh, it's so cute. I want one." One of the dads, a nice guy, vague name, probably Steve, said that Bear is going to be her best friend. I laughed, because that's what you do when people say normal things at normal parties. Mia carried the bear off to play, and the house went back to its usual birthday roar. Kids running, parents sipping coffee like it was medication, paper plates stacking up, frosting appearing in places frosting should never be. At the time, it really did feel normal. Not peaceful, not calm, but normal. And that's the thing about normal. You don't realize it's the last time until it's already gone. About 20 minutes later, Mia appeared in the doorway of the living room, a teddy bear in one arm, her little brow pinched the way it gets when she's trying to do math. "Mommy," she called. I turned, still mid-smile, because I was performing I'm fine like it was my full-time job. She stepped closer. She wasn't crying. She wasn't upset, just confused. Then she held up the teddy bear. There was a small opening near one of the seams, like a zipper hidden under fur. The kind you don't notice unless you're the kind of child who believes every object is a mystery waiting to be solved. "Mia, what did you?" She squeezed the bear's side and looked up at me. "Mommy," she said very quietly. "What is it?" Her voice did something to me, like a hand reaching inside my chest. I still went. I leaned in, and my skin went cold, because inside the bear, just barely visible through the opened seam, was something that definitely wasn't stuffing, something hard, something not meant for a child's toy. My stomach dropped so fast I felt it in my knees. My first instinct was to react the way my body wanted to react, to shout, to demand, to call Janet and Frank and ask them what kind of deranged little game they thought this was. But there were 3 little girls behind Mia. There were parents in my living room, there was a birthday cake with candles waiting to be lit, and there was Mia's face, looking at me like I was the final answer. So I swallowed it, I made my voice soft. "Oh," I said like she'd just shown me a loose button. "Let me see it for a second, sweetheart." Mia hesitated. "Is it broken?" "No," I lied, "I just want to check something." I took the teddy bear from her hands gently, so gently like I was holding a BMB. "Go play," I said. "I'll bring it right back." Mia nodded because Mia is a good kid, because Mia trusts me. Because Mia had no idea she just handed me the beginning of the end. I walked down the hallway without rushing, because rushing would have made the parents look up. And I didn't want questions. Not yet. I stepped into my bedroom, the room Adam and I used to share before the divorce, turned it into neutral territory and shut the door. My hands were shaking before I even realized I'd started breathing differently. I sat on the edge of the bed with the bear in my lap. I stared at that seam. I stared at the hard shape inside. And I realized something very clearly. Whatever this was, it wasn't an accident. This bear wasn't just a gift. It was a message. My heart thudded once, heavy and slow. I opened the seam a little more. Looked, checked, adjusted the bear in my hands so the light hit the inside. My breath went thin. My face went pale, and I felt something in me, something tired and old, finally get angry. Outside my bedroom door, I could hear the party. Laughter. Running feet, someone yelling about juice. In my lap, a brown teddy bear sat like it was innocent. It wasn't. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I did the only thing I could do. I closed the seam, smoothed the fur, and stood up. I put the bear somewhere safe in my room, somewhere Mia couldn't reach, somewhere it couldn't accidentally end up back in her arms. Then I looked in the mirror and practiced my smile like I was rehearsing for a play, because I still had a birthday party to finish, and I wasn't ready yet to let anyone see what had just changed. I walked back out to the living room, served cake, sang happy birthday, clapped at the right moments. And all the while, in the back of my mind, one thought kept repeating like a warning bell that the teddy bear had already done its job, and I hadn't even figured out what it was. When the last guest left, I stood in my kitchen staring at a stack of paper plates. Mia was upstairs brushing her teeth, humming to herself. She'd had a great day. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt like I ran a marathon while carrying a secret in my mouth like broken glass, because I knew what was waiting in my room and I knew who had sent it. Janet and Frank didn't become my in-laws by accident. They came with Adam like a warranty you don't read until it's too late. When I first met Adam, he was charming, funny, easy, the kind of man who could talk his way out of a speeding ticket and then convince you it was the officer's fault for standing there. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't loud. He wasn't the kind of husband you warn your friends about immediately. He was slippery. Money would disappear, not in a dramatic way. Not in a "we're going to lose the house tomorrow," just enough to make you double-check the account. $100 here, $200 there. He always had an explanation. "Oh, I forgot to tell you. I paid the car insurance. Oh, I grabbed groceries. Oh, I had to cover something at work." And for a while, I believed him, because that's what you do when you love someone. You make their stories fit. Janet and Frank were always around, close enough that dropping by felt like a hobby. Sunday dinners, random Tuesday visits, phone calls that started with just checking in and ended with, "we're worried about how you're managing things." They were obsessed with money in that old-fashioned way, like money was morality. They'd ask questions that sounded casual but landed like inspections. "So how much are you putting away each month? Are you still using that bank, or did you finally switch? What's in your name versus Adam's?" If I hesitated, Janet would tilt her head and smile like I was a child hiding a report card. And Adam never stopped it. If anything, he'd nod along, laugh, shrug. "Mom's just like that," he'd say. "She means well." Sometimes he'd add, "Maybe they have a point," which is a special kind of betrayal. The quiet kind. The kind where you're standing in your own marriage and still somehow outnumbered. Then Mia was born, and the money got worse. Not because babies are expensive, they are, but because Adam started panicking about money like it was a personal insult. He'd get restless, irritable, secretive. He started staying out late with friends. He started taking calls in the garage. I found online transactions that didn't make sense, withdrawals at weird times. Payments I couldn't match to anything in our lives. When I asked, he'd get defensive. Why are you tracking me? I'm not tracking you. I'm trying to understand why rent is due and the account is bleeding. He always turned it into a fight about my tone, my timing, my trust issues. And I'll be honest, my trust issues weren't imaginary. They were built. Slowly. Brick by brick. It took me longer than I should have to name it. Gambling. Not just a few bets with friends, not just a game night. Gambling in the way that makes money vanishes and leaves behind nothing but excuses and adrenaline and debt. When I confronted him, he swore it wasn't that bad. He swore it wasn't often. He swore he had it under control. Janet and Frank's response was, not what you'd hope. They didn't say, Adam, stop. They didn't say, Adam, get help. They said things like, Michelle, you need to be more supportive. They said, money stress makes men do things. They said, maybe if you didn't make him feel judged, it was always my fault somehow. And Adam, again, did nothing. He let them. He let them talk over me like I was furniture. He'd stand there and act tired and say, can we not do this right now? As if the problem was the conversation, not the gambling. I tried, for longer than I'm proud of. I tried budgets. I tried joint counseling. I tried giving him more freedom, which is hilarious in hindsight, because what he wanted was freedom from consequences. I tried to be calm and rational and supportive, but I also had a daughter. And at some point, you realize you're not raising one child. You're raising two, and one of them has a driver's license. The final turning point came after my father died. He wasn't young, but losing him still felt like someone pulled a chair out from under my life. He left me some money, not a fortune, not quit your job and buy a vineyard money. But he also left something else. A trust set aside for Mia, about $150,000. My father didn't restrict it down to the last penny. He trusted my judgment. It could be used for Mia if needed. That was the point, but I didn't want to touch it. I wanted to protect it like it was oxygen. College, my first apartment, a future where she didn't have to start adulthood already behind. Adam found out and the tone of our marriage changed overnight. At first, it was just a suggestion. We could borrow a little. We could pay off some things. It's for Mia anyway. If we use it on expenses now, that's still for her. He started pitching it like a loophole. Then the requests got sharper. He claimed he had a business opportunity, a debt that needed paying, an urgent situation that would blow up if we didn't act. I later learned those urgent situations were gambling debts and losses he couldn't admit out loud. When I refused, he got angry. When I refused again, Janet and Frank got involved. They cornered me at dinner. Janet smiled and said, a good mother uses every resource for her child. Frank grunted and said, what's the point of money if you won't use it? Adam sat there like a spectator at his own life. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, and they wanted mine. I filed for divorce. I didn't want to, not really. I didn't grow up dreaming of joint custody schedules and split holidays. My own parents divorced when I was Mia's age. I remember the confusion. The 2 birthdays, the feeling of being passed back and forth like luggage. I swore I wouldn't do that to my child. But I also swore I wouldn't let my child grow up watching her mother be drained, financially, emotionally, by a man who wouldn't stop and parents who would never let him face himself. So I did it. And then, because I'm apparently allergic to making things easy for myself, I tried to be generous. I offered 50-50 custody. I offered to split assets cleanly. I even offered to keep things peaceful around the inheritance I'd received while we were married, because it wasn't worth a legal war. Legal fees can eat a whole life. Adam acted like he agreed. We were almost settled, Angela Park said. My lawyer, calm and sharp, the kind of woman who could stare down a hurricane. Adam hadn't signed yet, but he played cooperative. And I believed him, because I wanted to believe him, because Mia deserved adults who could act like adults. So when Janet and Frank mailed that bear and insisted it be opened early, part of me thought it was just them being them. A power move, a performance, a way of making sure their presence hovered over my house even when they weren't in it. I didn't yet understand how far they were willing to go, but I did understand one thing. Standing in my bedroom earlier that day, I'd offered them peace, and they'd answered with something hidden inside a teddy bear, which meant the amicable part had never been real. It had just been the mask. And now I couldn't stop wondering if I was already giving Adam half. What else did he want? By the time Mia was in bed that night, I felt like my face hurt from pretending. She was still glowing from the party, sticky hair, cupcake frosting in places I didn't want to identify, the soft exhaustion of a child who'd been celebrated properly. Best birthday ever, she mumbled into her pillow. My throat tightened. Mine too, I lied, because mothers lie for love all the time. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and stood in the doorway for a second longer than usual. Mia didn't know. Not really. She knew something had been weird about the bear. She knew I took it away, but she didn't know the storm. She didn't know the shape of what was coming, and that was the most painful part. Now the house was quiet, and the quiet was loud. I went back to my bedroom and took the teddy bear down from where I'd hidden it. It sat in my hands like an accusation. I opened the seam Mia had found, whiter this time. Inside was a small device. Hard plastic wiring something metallic. Not stuffing, not a squeaker. I didn't understand it at first, not completely. I'm not stupid, but I'm also not the type of person who casually identifies electronics hidden in plush animals. I did what any modern woman does when faced with a nightmare wrapped in fur. I took pictures, close-ups, angles, the tiny printed numbers on the plastic casing. Then I Googled. The search results didn't feel real at first. They felt like something that belonged to someone else's life. But piece by piece, it came together. A recording component, a location tracker, so they were trying to spy on us. But why? What did they want? What did Adam want? My hands went cold all over again. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the bear, thinking about how many times Mia had hugged it, how many times she'd pressed her cheek against it like it was safe, how many times Janet had kissed her and called her sweet girl while smiling at me like I was failing a test. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even call Adam right away because I already knew what that call would be. He'd deny it. He'd say I was paranoid. He'd say I was spiraling. And then he'd report back to them and they'd adjust. No, if they were playing games, I wasn't going to announce my moves. I put the bear back together as best I could, like I hadn't seen anything. Then I placed it in a sealed bag, tucked it away. Then I sat there in the dark thinking one simple thought. Adam is good with tech. Janet and Frank are good with guilt and control and casserole dishes. But tech? Adam. The next morning I called Angela Park. I didn't even try to sound casual. I need to see you, I said. Angela didn't ask why. She just gave me time. Her office smelled like clean paper and stress. I sat across from her desk and slid my phone forward. I took photos, I said, of a device. Inside Mia's birthday gift. Angela's face didn't change much, but her eyes sharpened. She studied the pictures, zoomed in, zoomed out. Then she looked up at me. Michelle, she said very calmly, this is serious. I know, I said, that's why I'm here. Angela set the phone down gently, like it might bite her. Before we talk about the device, she said, I need to tell you something. My stomach tightened. She opened my file, and pointed to a page. Adam rejected the 50-50, she said. I blinked. What? He rejected the custody proposal, Angela repeated. He wants full custody. My mouth went dry. That doesn't make sense, I said. He said I know what he said, Angela cut in, still calm. I know what he presented to you, but in the paperwork, he's alleging you're unstable. My heart started pounding in my ears. He's calling me unstable? Angela nodded. And he's requesting that the court place him in control of decisions involving Mia's finances and care. There it was. The click, the reason. It wasn't about Mia. Not really. Because if it were about Mia, 50-50 custody would have been enough. But full custody meant control. Full custody meant access. Full custody meant a pathway to the only real money in this entire mess, Mia's trust fund. I sat there, hands clenched in my lap, and I felt something in me shift, something that had been trying to stay polite for months. I'd offered him fairness. I'd offered him peace, and he'd answered by trying to wiretap my home and take my child. Angela leaned forward. Do you have evidence of his gambling? Yes, I said immediately. Texts, bank statements, messages where he asked me to use the trust money. Good, she said. We're going to need it. She tapped my phone again. And this device. We need to treat it properly. You should file a police report. The device itself becomes evidence. Any forensic results take time, but the fact it exists is powerful. I nodded because my body was operating on something older than fear now. Strategy, protection, war. Angela watched me for a second. You offered him an uncontested path, she said quietly. He chose conflict. I felt my jaw tighten. Then he's going to learn what conflict looks like, I said. Angela didn't smile, but her voice held approval. That's the correct response. I left her office with a list of things to gather, copies to print, accounts to document. And I left with something else, too, clarity. Adam hadn't been playing fair. He'd been playing for keeps. And now so was I. A few days later, it was time for Mia's second birthday. The one with Adam. The one with Janet and Frank hovering in the background like they'd never done anything wrong in their lives. I didn't want to let Mia go. Every protective cell in my body screamed not to. But I also knew how this would look if I stopped it without proof. If I suddenly became difficult. If I became the story they wanted. So I did what mothers do. I planned. That morning I put a watch on Mia's wrist. It looked like a normal kid's watch. Bright, simple, the kind you'd buy because children can't tell time but love accessories. I crouched in front of her and kept my voice light. If you feel scared, I said, brushing hair out of her face, press this button. Mia looked down. Why? Just in case, I said. Sometimes grown-ups get mixed up. If you can't find daddy or you need me, you press it. Okay, Mia nodded. Okay. I kissed her forehead and smiled. My smile didn't reach my bones. Adam came to pick her up. He stood on my porch like a man who had rehearsed being harmless. Hey, he said, as if we were just two friendly co-parents who'd accidentally ended up divorcing because of scheduling conflicts. Hey, I said back. Mia ran to him. He lifted her up and spun her once like a normal dad. I watched his hands. I watched his face. I watched everything. He handed me a slip of paper with an address, pick up instructions. We'll drop her here, he said. Same time. Text me when you're leaving, I said. Sure, Adam said easily. And then they were gone. The hours crawled. I tried to be normal. I cleaned. I did laundry. I stared at my phone too much. I checked the time. I checked it again. Then again, because anxiety is just your brain hitting refresh like it's going to load new information. When it was time to pick Mia up, I drove to the address Adam had given me. It was a building, not a house. Not a backyard full of balloons. Not anything that screamed children's party, just a place. I pulled into the lot and sat for a second looking around. No cars I recognized. No music. No kids, no decorations, no signs. Maybe it was inside. Maybe there was a back entrance. Maybe I was early. I got out and walked around. Checked the address on my phone. I looked at the doors. I tried to find something that made sense. Nothing. I checked the time. I checked my messages. I called Adam. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I texted. I hear where you know reply. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I had the wrong building. Maybe I misread the number. Maybe I was on the wrong side. I walked the perimeter like a lost tourist. Then I tried to calm myself. Maybe they were late. Maybe they'd gotten stuck. Maybe they were 5 minutes away with Mia in the car singing happy birthday to herself. I waited. I scanned the street. I called again. Still nothing. And slowly, painfully, the rationalizations fell away and fear stepped forward. Because when your child is missing, your body knows it before your mind allows the words. Then my phone buzzed. An alert, not a message. Not a call, an SOS. My hands went numb. I opened it and saw the location ping. Mine, at Janet and Frank's house. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I didn't. I moved. I got in the car and drove. Fast but focused, because panic driving is how people end up dead, and I needed to stay alive long enough to get my child. As I drove, I called the police. My daughter's 6, I said, voice tight, not dramatic, just factual. I received an SOS alert from her watch. I went to the pickup point I was given and she wasn't there. I can't reach her father. I have her GPS location. Please, please send someone to check. The dispatcher asked questions. I answered them. My voice sounded like someone else's, like I'd become a woman made of pure checklist. I gave the address. I kept driving. When I turned onto Janet and Frank's street 5 minutes later, I saw a patrol car already there. My heart seized with relief and fury all at once. I pulled up and ran to the door. Before I could knock, it opened, and Mia burst out like she'd been held underwater. She ran straight into my arms and wrapped herself around me so tight her little fingers hurt. I held her and breathed her in. Warm hair, shampoo, the smell of a child who should never be used as a weapon. Mia, I whispered, I'm here, I'm right here. She pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes wet and confused. Grandma said you didn't come, she choked out. She said you abandoned me. My throat closed. "I did come," I said immediately. "I was there. I was looking for you." Mia's face crumpled like she was trying to hold two truths at once and didn't know which one to trust. Behind her, Janet appeared in the doorway with her hands clasped like she was hosting a Bible study. "Oh, Michelle," she said, voice sweet. "This was all a misunderstanding." Frank stood behind her, arms crossed, looking irritated, like my missing child was an inconvenience to his evening. An officer stepped closer and asked a few basic questions. Calm voice, neutral posture, the practiced tone of someone who's seen every version of family chaos. Mia sniffled and said, "I got scared. Mommy didn't come." My chest tightened. Because of course she said that. She was 6. She'd been told it. She'd believed it. She'd pressed the button because she was scared, and kids don't know what else to do when they think they've been left. Janet murmured, "She's been so emotional lately." I looked at her, really looked, and I saw the same smile she'd worn at Sunday dinners when she'd asked me about my bank account like it was her business. I didn't argue on the porch. I didn't explain. I didn't give them the fight they wanted. I lifted Mia into my arms and said, "We're going home." Janet opened her mouth like she was going to protest, but the officer's presence made her pause. Frank looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. Adam was nowhere in sight, which, honestly, felt like the most Adam thing possible. I buckled Mia into the car and drove home shaking with contained rage. Once we were inside, I made hot chocolate. Not because hot chocolate fixes trauma, but because it gives small hands something warm to hold, and sometimes that's the first step back to safety. I sat with Mia on the couch until her breathing slowed. "I didn't abandon you," I told her quietly. "Never." Mia nodded, exhausted. She leaned against me like a baby, even though she was 6 and determined to be big. Later, when she was asleep, I went to my room and opened the watch app. I wasn't expecting much. A timestamp, a location log. But when I clicked the SOS event, there was an audio file attached. My fingers hovered over it for 1 second, then I pressed play. At first it was muffled, fabric, movement, a child's breathing. Then Janet's voice slid in, clear enough to make my skin crawl. "You see," she was saying, "your mommy didn't come." Mia's small voice. She said she would. Janet again, softer now, like poison and honey. "Sometimes mommies say things and don't mean them. You need to remember that." Frank's voice rumbled in the background. "Stop crying." "Big girls don't cry." Mia's sob caught in her throat and my stomach turned. Then Janet's voice again, and this time it wasn't comfortable. It was instruction. "If anyone asks," she said, "you tell them your mommy forgets things. You tell them she gets upset. You tell them she isn't stable." I stopped breathing. Mia whimpered and Janet kept going. "You don't have to like saying it," Janet murmured, "but it's important. Daddy needs help. We need help. And your mommy, well, your mommy can't take care of you the way we can." The recording continued. More coaching, more shaping, more deliberate, sickening adult hands trying to sculpt my child's reality. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. I saved the file, backed it up, sent it to Angela Park. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and stared into the dark, listening to the quiet house and thinking one cold, steady thought. They wanted proof. Now they'd given it to me, and they were going to regret every second of it. Months later, we had the hearing. By then, it wasn't one incident. It was a pattern. A teddy bear with a recorder and tracker inside it, sent by Janet and Frank, handled by Adam. A police report. A forensic result tying Adam to the device. And Mia's SOS recording. My 6-year-old's voice trembled while adults coached her like she was a witness they could rewrite. It wasn't he said, she said anymore. It was their voices, their choices, their fingerprints. The judge didn't need me to be dramatic. I didn't have to perform pain or prove I was the better parent in some inspirational speech. I just had to tell the truth and hand over the evidence. I got full custody. Adam got supervised visitation. On paper, it was structured. In reality, he barely used it. Every other week if he felt like it, sometimes less. Sometimes he'd cancel last minute, like fatherhood was an optional subscription. Janet and Frank disappeared from our lives completely. Mia didn't ask about them anymore. Not after that day, not after the lies. Not after the feeling of being turned into a pawn and realizing it. Kids don't always have the words for betrayal. They just stop reaching for the people who did it. And financially, financially, I could finally breathe. My salary stayed in my household. No more money vanishing. No more emergencies that always required my sacrifice. Mia's trust fund stayed untouched and invested. $150,000 sitting exactly where it belonged. In her future, not in someone else's appetite. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how close I came to playing nice right into a trap. And then I look at my daughter, safe, sleeping, steady, and I know I didn't go too far. I went exactly far enough.